There are episodes in long-running television series that rise above the ordinary rhythm of comedy and familiarity. Viață dublă from Las Fierbinți is one such episode, one that trades easy laughter for the kind of quiet recognition that stays with the viewer long after the credits fade. The brilliance of this story lies not in its punchlines, but in its delicate portrayal of human contradiction. It shows how people can live two lives at once, the one they display in public and the one that quietly trembles behind closed doors. It is not a story about deceit in the criminal sense, but about the survival instinct that leads ordinary people to invent better versions of themselves in order to endure. The first thing that strikes the viewer is how calm the episode feels. The camera glides over the familiar streets of Fierbinți with a patience that hints at introspection. The light is softer, the color palette warmer, and the silence more meaningful. Bobiță, as usual, stands at the bar, counting money and pretending to be in control of everything. His small gestures are ritualistic. They keep the illusion of order alive in a world that never changes. Then, as if on cue, Gianni bursts in, full of nervous energy, announcing that he has been living a double life. The room freezes. The phrase uttered in his overconfident tone sends waves of curiosity through the bar. It becomes the catalyst for a chain of events that reveal everyone's hidden side. Gianni's confession seems comical at first. He claims he has been working secretly as a model for an advertising campaign in Bucharest. The idea of the clumsy, self-absorbed Gianni as a model is absurd, and yet it reveals something touching about his endless need for validation. He is not lying maliciously. He is trying to reinvent himself, to escape the narrow confines of small-town existence. The laughter that follows his declaration hides empathy. Every viewer understands the longing to be noticed, to feel exceptional even for a moment. Gianni embodies the fragile hope that something extraordinary might still happen to him. Meanwhile, Celentano, usually the philosopher drunk, begins to behave strangely. He stops drinking for a few days, claims to have found a higher purpose, and is seen reading an old religious book. The villagers mock him, assuming he has simply found another excuse to talk nonsense. But in one of the episode's most beautifully written scenes, Celentano reveals his truth to Ardiles. He is pretending to be pious so that people respect him. He does not believe in holiness. He believes in dignity. His double life is not a scam, but a desperate strategy to be treated seriously for once. The irony is that his act of pretense brings out genuine introspection. By pretending to be wise, he momentarily becomes wise. The show captures this paradox with tenderness. Dalida's subplot adds emotional depth to the episode. She secretly meets a delivery driver from another town who believes she is a successful businesswoman. The contrast between her modest life in Fierbinți and the persona she projects in those brief encounters is heartbreaking. When she puts on makeup and speaks with exaggerated elegance, the viewer sees both her vanity and her vulnerability. She wants to be loved not for what she is, but for what she could have been. The episode never mocks her for this. It treats her illusions as acts of courage, small rebellions against a life that rarely offers anything new. The writing of Viață dublă succeeds because it refuses to simplify. Every character's double life has a different motive. For Gianni, it is pride. For Celentano, it is respect. For Dalida, it is affection. The writers weave these threads together, until the village itself feels like a stage where everyone performs a role they secretly despise. Even Bobica, the cynic, participates in the farce. He ridicules everyone's pretensions, yet late at night, when the bar is empty, he practices English phrases from a cheap online course. He dreams of opening a second bar for tourists, but he never admits it. His double life unfolds in silence, in his mind. What makes the episode powerful is the way it reveals truth through humor. The jokes are there, subtle and situational, but they no longer serve as mere entertainment. They function as a mirror, exposing how laughter often hides longing. When the villagers gathered to gossip about Gianni's supposed modeling career, the scene feels almost theatrical. Each character projects their own secret envy onto him. The conversation becomes a social dissection, showing how people use ridicule to protect themselves from their own frustrations. The cinematography deserves praise for its emotional precision. Long takes replace quick cuts, allowing the audience to observe micro-expressions and silences. The setting of Fierbinți, with its cracked sidewalks and faded houses, becomes more than a background. It is a character itself. The village breathes, sighs, and listens. When Gianni stands in the middle of the street rehearsing his model poses, the camera doesn't laugh. It watches with quiet compassion. The visual language transforms ridicule into melancholy. There is a subtle shift halfway through the episode. The story that began as a farce becomes introspective. Celentano, sitting by the river, tells Gianni that living two lives is not a sin, but a form of art. "You have to lie to yourself a little," he says, "otherwise life becomes too heavy." The scene, delivered without music, lingers on their faces as they laugh and share a bottle of cheap beer. In that moment, the show transcends its genre. It becomes a meditation on resilience. Another scene worth mentioning occurs in the salon. Dalida is caught off guard when her admirer unexpectedly visits Fierbinți. The man arrives expecting glamour and sophistication, only to find a simple hairdresser surrounded by gossiping villagers. The tension is palpable. Instead of running away, Dalida decides to maintain her illusion to the end. She puts on a confident smile and introduces him to everyone as if nothing were wrong. It is one of the bravest acts in the episode, an affirmation of self-worth in a world that constantly reminds her of her limitations. When the man eventually leaves, disappointed but polite, Dalida sits alone and whispers, "At least for a moment, I felt beautiful." That line is the emotional nucleus of the story. From a thematic perspective, Viața Dublă explores authenticity and the burden of expectation. In a society obsessed with appearances, sincerity becomes a luxury. The villagers are not hypocrites by nature. They are survivors of a culture that demands adaptation. The double life each character lives is their way of negotiating dignity. The episode therefore challenges the audience to examine their own dualities. It subtly suggests that everyone plays a role, even those who pretend to judge others. One of the most effective choices in the episode is the use of silence. There are several moments when nothing is said, yet everything is felt. When Bobica closes the bar and listens to the night sounds of the village, the silence speaks volumes. It tells of exhaustion, of acceptance, of the small comfort found in routine. This restraint in storytelling is what elevates Las Fierbinți above the typical sitcom. It respects the viewer's intelligence and emotional sensitivity. Compared to earlier episodes focused on slapstick and chaos, Viața dublă is almost poetic. It carries the maturity of a show that has grown alongside its audience. The humor remains, but it now serves as an emotional lubricant rather than a shield. The characters have evolved beyond stereotypes into fully realized individuals. Gianni's foolishness hides longing. Celentano's absurdity hides depth. Dalida's vanity hides pain. Even the secondary characters contribute to the theme. Ardiles pretends to be brave. Branzoe pretends to be moral. And everyone pretends to be satisfied. The village becomes a universe of masks, each worn out of love for life itself. The emotional climax arrives when all the illusions collapse simultaneously. The supposed modeling job is exposed as a scam. Dalida's admirer disappears, and Celentano returns to his bench by the bar, drunk again. But instead of despair, the episode offers a gentle acceptance. The final scene reunites everyone at Bobica's bar. The mood is subdued but not tragic. They drink, laugh, and tease each other. Beneath the surface humor lies an unspoken agreement. They all know, and they all forgive. They understand that pretending does not make them fake. It makes them human. Technically, the episode shines in its dialogue. Every line feels spontaneous, shaped by real experience rather than scripted cleverness. The actors deliver their performances with effortless authenticity, balancing irony and sincerity in perfect measure. The direction avoids sentimentality. It trusts the audience to find emotion in subtle gestures rather than in grand speeches. The realism is almost documentary-like, yet the tone remains lyrical. Reflecting personally, Viața dublă reminds me of moments when people, out of sheer exhaustion or hope, create small lies to make their lives more bearable. I have seen it in small towns, in families, in workplaces. A man pretending to be successful to hide his anxiety. A woman pretending to be happy to protect her pride. These fictions are not crimes. They are acts of endurance. Watching the villagers of Fierbinți live their fragile fantasies, I felt empathy rather than judgment. The episode captures that universal human impulse to embellish reality in order to survive it. The beauty of Las Fierbinți lies in its ability to combine humor and tragedy without contradiction. It understands that laughter is often born from pain, and that pretending can sometimes lead us closer to truth. Viața dublă embodies that philosophy perfectly. It is a story about masks that reveals the faces beneath them. It invites the viewer to smile, then to think, and finally, to feel. In the closing shot, as the villagers disperse into the night, Bobica looks up at the dark sky and mutters to himself, "We all live 2 lives, but only one we can afford." The camera lingers on his face, then fades to black. That single sentence encapsulates the entire message of the episode. It acknowledges the inevitability of duality in human existence. No one is purely sincere or purely deceitful. We oscillate between truth and illusion, between what we show and what we hide. Ultimately, Viața dublă stands as a quiet masterpiece of Romanian television. It strips away the superficiality of comedy to reveal something raw and enduring. It asks the audience to look beyond the laughter and see the fragile humanity of those who live small lives with big dreams. The villagers of Fierbinți may not escape their circumstances, but they possess something rare, the courage to imagine more. In their laughter and their lies, they find a way to keep their hearts beating. Las Fierbinți continues to evolve because it understands that the essence of storytelling lies in empathy. Viață dublă does not preach or condemn. It listens, it observes, it laughs softly at the absurdities of life and forgives them. In doing so, it mirrors our own contradictions. It tells us that living a double life does not make us false. It makes us human, complex, and beautifully incomplete.